let me just say that I think this is an important meeting, and I am honored to be here. I think I'm the only person on the program that you're going to hear from this morning that's not a real doctor. These are scholars, and they have real degrees. I'm just a physician. I want to be clear. I'm not a scholar. I'm not a Black Studies scholar. I'm not a cultural historian. I'm not a historian. Why am I here? I hope, as I was thinking about this and listening to Haki, I hope I'm here as most of you. View me as part of the audience, if you will, as we discuss this important piece of our history and we think about what we're going to leave behind. This is a book. Well, the other reason, let me be honest, the other reason I'm here is because when they asked me to do this, I said I have to hurry and finish reading this book. Because otherwise I might have gotten to, Thanksgiving before I finished it. So, this is a book, unlike most books. This is a book, actually, like many of you, was eagerly awaiting. I knew that Dr. Marable had been working on this for a decade. I knew that he considered Brother Malcolm the most important contribution of our people in the last 50, 60, 70 years. And so, as a product of our time, of Malcolm's time, I was eagerly awaiting this book. Now, I don't want to, I'm not a dramatist either, so I don't want to draw you out. I invite all of you to read this book. I enjoyed reading the book. I think it is an important and interesting read. So then, as the book came out, the controversy, which you all know, and we've heard some of it this morning, was here. That's also something that pleased me because, frankly, most of the time, when a book about a Black American is published, nobody knows, including many of our people, but nobody knows. Nobody discusses, nobody argues, nobody contemplates, nobody reflects. So as the opening person who greeted us pointed out, that whatever else Professor Marble's book did, it allows us to examine again this important figure of our history and to rethink, for most people in this audience, not everybody, our youth. I did not consider this book, either before I read it or after I read it, a mystery book. I was not looking for and did not expect to find pieces of information that I knew nothing about. I was not expecting a religious tone that praised a human being, and I didn't get any of those things. What I did expect, which is why I was looking forward to it, is one Black man's perspective on a period of history and a historical figure. Now, let me just say right now that I did not know, like many of you in this audience, personally, Dr. Marable. I have great respect for him as a scholar. I certainly knew about his activities from afar. And I know he's a trained historian and scholar, and that comes across. This is a biography, not a poem, not a cultural discussion. And it appears to me like many other biographies I have read. So let's think about our different relationships, because you see, we're in trouble. Those of you in my generation, we're in trouble. We're going to die with a unique, valuable in many ways, but unique concept of Malcolm, because we were young when he was here, when he walked among us. So whatever my grandchildren think about Malcolm, it's never going to be like what I think about Malcolm. Okay. And I think that fact is important as we discuss. I am not so much concerned about either Dr. Maribel's reputation. I think his reputation is solid. He's not here to join us in this argument. I wish he were alive to be on the stage and we could have debates. He was a good debater, and that would be an enriching debate. I'm not concerned about what we, those of us that are of my generation, think. I'm concerned about how this discussion enlightens our children and our grandchildren. That's what I'm concerned about. So let me tell you my thinking as I have listened to the debate among our people and read on the internet the controversies and attack. And Malcolm X, I was talking to some younger people not too long ago about Malcolm X. In their mind, Malcolm X is a figure of history. Not so in my mind. In their mind, Malcolm X is a person of Spike Lee's film, or the person they imagined when they read the autobiography. Not in my mind. Let me tell you what Malcolm X is in my mind. Malcolm X was born in 1925, 2 years before my father. 2 years. In my mind, Malcolm X is like my daddy. He is of my father's generation. Now there's a problem when we consider this. Malcolm X was assassinated. My father, and like most little girls, my father could walk on water. He was a loving, good father. When I was 10 or 11 or 12, he could do no wrong. And even in my 20s, I looked up to him. I think this is appropriate for young girls. But I saw my father change. We didn't see Malcolm change. He wasn't allowed to do that. I saw his attitudes about politics change. I saw the pedestal I put him on, inappropriately, but you know, I'm a child, change. I realized that not everything he thought I agreed with. Not everything he said was true. Not all his relationships were appropriate. And I had the privilege of watching my father, as I matured, age. I saw him in his late 40s. I saw him in his 50s. I saw his ability to play tennis disappear. I saw him shrink and become frail. And I sat by his bed when he died at 81. And never in those 81 years did my love or respect for him change or disappear. But he was never the father of a 10-year-old. The father that I had in my mind as a 10-year-old. He was not the man that I thought he was when I was 20. He was not the man that I saw dying in his bed the day he died. He was a complicated person that you have to take all of that history and all of his relationships to understand. This is the issue that we have with Malcolm X. Because we think of him frozen in historical time. We all are a product of our political time. Let me tell you the first time that I heard Malcolm X speak. Because I'm a few years younger, not many, a few years younger than Brother Hakeem. And I grew up in Cleveland. And my little brother came to me and he said, Linda, this great guy named Malcolm X, you know, with the black Muslims, with the nation, he's going to be in town. He's going to speak. Let's go hear him. So we were young, radical teenagers. We said, yeah, let's go. We went to the mosque. We knew where the mosque was. We weren't a Christian family, let me just say. So that's not my hang-up. We went to the mosque. I don't know if any of you have been to a mosque in those days. You walk in and they separate men on one side, women on the other. I don't know if they did this every time, but this was a national leader coming in. We were searched. We sat down in the audience. A local minister came out and began speaking about the nation and what the nation believed in and the role of women, the role of men, why we were separated, their normal stuff. And we waited. And then Malcolm came out, a minister. And he repeated those same precepts. And then he got to what we came for, which was to hear his political commentary. I was in love. Okay? I was in love. I ate up every word. After the sermon, we left. My brother and I joined up. He said, "What you think?" I said, "Oh, he was so wonderful. But I'm never going back there again. They don't like women." Now, do you see the difference? It's not that what Brother Hakeem thought or felt about Malcolm was wrong. It was just different than what I felt. We both were in love with a hero. We didn't have a whole bunch of heroes. I want to be clear with you. If you come to my house today, you will not see a picture of Dr. King in my study. It won't be there. There's a picture right above my desk of Malcolm X. But I was a young girl, and the residence to a young girl of that particular culture, it wasn't going to make, just like Hakeem said, he wasn't going to go there with the Islam. I couldn't go there. We are not talking about right or wrong. I have no idea what Malcolm did on some evening, and I don't even care. I don't have any idea, and I don't care. I do think and understand that biographies speculate on this stuff. They do it all the time. I think that the book is well researched. Is it correct in every instance? No. I can't tell you where it's wrong, okay? But I know a book that size has mistakes in it. I know that. Any book does. Would I agree with every interpretation that Manny makes about Malcolm's life? No. They're speculations. He says that. Read any historical biography by a scholar, and you will find these speculations. I expected nothing less. It is interesting to me that while we have no problems accepting that Malcolm was a thief, a hustler, if you believe him, a pimp, went to jail, doesn't destroy his hero status in our eyes. Are we suddenly so distressed to find out that maybe he had an affair? I don't know whether he did or not, but even if he did, it doesn't bother me. He was a man. So when my mother told me after my father died that she thinks I had some brothers and sisters running around, was I shocked? No. Did it mean that I loved my father less? No. It's just information. I was glad she told me. She had never told me that until after he died. It did not in any way change my opinion or love or concern about my father. I think what this calls upon us to do is be mature as a people. I look forward to the book from the Third World Press. I enjoy all the controversy because how we interpret our culture is important. It's not a question about preserving Malcolm's reputation. His reputation doesn't need preserved. It's about having an adult conversation amongst our community about these critical issues like the brother over here asked. Our attitude toward women. Our attitude toward lesbian and gay men. Our attitude toward electoral politics. Our attitude toward education. History serves as a signpost, a guide for us to have these discussions and arguments. I'm not against arguments are productive, so I'm not against arguments. I ask you to consider this, brothers and sisters, just for a moment. Consider the fact that many of our heroes died too young. Study, if you will, read his autobiography and all the numerous other biographies of one hero, in my opinion, the greatest black man of the past 100 years, Nelson Mandela. Read some of that work and see how different perspectives come. And notice what happens when you have someone who is a radical, violent terrorist in his youth and an internationally venerated elder at 92. And watch the evolution of a person. And especially read his autobiography as he talks about mistakes he thinks he made and perspectives that changed in his life. Life is about transformation. There is no question that Malcolm was in the midst of a major transformation, probably, had he lived, the biggest single transformation of his life. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what he would have turned into. I don't think anyone else does. But I think a discussion about what might have been is a useful discussion as we consider options open to us. And the last thing I want to say is that this debate amongst us, the heat of it, the anger of it, reminds me of another debate that I never appreciated until this book came out. Now work with me, y'all. Ignore for a moment the facts of history, just for a moment. And imagine that you're from Mississippi, a good red-blooded American, and you venerate the fathers who founded this nation, and consider Thomas Jefferson a hero of democracy, okay, whose contribution to the world can't be underestimated. Imagine the rage you would feel when people dared to suggest that he lay down with a slave and produced children. Can y'all imagine the anger that you might feel when you were a red-blooded American? I will leave off the other part. But the reality is, he did, and it shouldn't be surprising. So rethink our discussions and debate around that context, and let us discuss and argue about the important stuff in this book, not about the 2 pages where Maribel speculates he might have had a liaison with a man. Now I mean no disrespect to anybody, but when I was young I wouldn't have said this, but now I'm old. I'm an old doctor. And if you tell me a brother that's been in the joint for a few years, okay? I mean, come on, you know, let's just loosen up a little bit. That's not important. Why did he put it in there? Because he's a historian and a biographer. That's what they do. They try to lay everything out. That's not what poets do. That's not what artists do. Okay? But that wasn't Maribel. He was a historian and a scholar. If any of us had spent 20 years doing this work, we would have produced a different book. Okay? Everybody in this room would have produced a different book. Unfortunately, it's only a handful of us in this room that could have produced a book. Okay. So, I think that Malcolm X is simply one of my heroes. I didn't feel any lesser love or admiration for him when I finished this book than when I started the book. I knew a lot more about him. I knew a lot of information I didn't know before, not in the broad important stuff, but details. And I'm not surprised that people have different interpretations. The next time you have your family together at Thanksgiving or some other holiday, and tell a family story where everybody at the table was there, you're going to hear, if there are 5 people at the table, you're going to hear 5 different stories. Okay, so we shouldn't be upset or concerned about that. What we need to ask ourselves as a people is, how do we take these threads of our history, the thread that calls for pride and independence and self-respect and anger at what we've experienced, and merge it with the other trends in our history to talk about how to accommodate pacifism, how to deal with electoral politics. Help us understand as we think about what we're going to do with the young brother we got in the White House, who's under attack, but in some people's opinion, including mine, not going in the right direction. How do we as a people discuss that? How do we give him strength? How do we as a movement embrace all the pieces of our movement? We've never been a monolith. The black cultural nationalists aren't a monolith, fight all the time. The mainstream civil rights groups aren't a monolith, fight all the time. The responsibility we have is to have our fights and debates in a way that move us and our children and our grandchildren forward, not backwards.